I was halfway through pouring my morning coffee when my phone rang. My sister's name flashed on the screen. I picked up expecting something casual, maybe gossip, maybe a favor. Instead, her voice came sharp and cheerful. "I'm moving into your Lake Arrowhead house tomorrow. I already replaced the wallpaper, so send me $3,000 for it." The mug trembled in my hand, coffee spilling over my fingers. I laughed because what else could I do? But when she added Mom and Dad already said yes, something inside me cracked. And that's the moment I realized whatever this was, it wasn't about wallpaper anymore. When the call ended, I just stood there, phone still pressed against my ear, as the sound of the espresso machine hissed behind me. The smell of burnt coffee filled the kitchen, bitter and heavy. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd misheard her. Maybe it was one of Abigail's ridiculous jokes, the kind she used to pull when we were kids. But then the text came through a picture of my living room. The wallpaper torn down, the caption reading, "Looks better already." My hands started shaking. I called her back, but it went straight to voicemail. So I did the one thing I shouldn't have done. I called my mother. "Mom," I said, trying to sound calm, "Abigail just told me she's moving into my Lake Arrowhead house. Please tell me that's not true." There was a pause. Then my mother's voice, smooth and dismissive. "Yes, honey. She mentioned it. Things have been hard for her lately, and you're not using that house anyway. It just makes sense." I blinked, feeling something twist inside me. "You gave her permission?" "Well, your father and I agreed it's better than letting it sit empty. Families help each other, Hillary. Don't be so dramatic." That word dramatic, I'd heard it my whole life. Every time Abigail crossed a line, every time I dared to protest, I could almost hear my father in the background mumbling, "She's overreacting again." I bit my lip until I tasted blood. "Mom." She changed the wallpaper without asking me. "Oh, please," she sighed. "She has good taste. It'll make the place feel warmer. Besides, you can always change it back." I didn't respond. I just listened to the clink of dishes in the background, to my mother's easy tone, as if what she'd done wasn't trespassing, wasn't betrayal. When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the kitchen window. Behind me, Los Angeles glowed tiny golden lights scattered over the hills. My apartment had always felt safe separate, but suddenly it felt invaded too. Abigail had always been the kind of person who took and expected applause for it. My parents had always enabled it. I could still remember being 16, saving up for months to buy my first car. Abigail borrowed it just for the weekend. 3 months later, she returned it with scratches down both sides, the gas tank empty. Mom's words still rang in my head. She didn't mean it. "Hillary, be kind. She's your sister." I had been kind over and over again. But as I stared at the phone in my hand, seeing that unread text with the photo of my ruined living room, something changed. A slow, unfamiliar heat built in my chest. It wasn't shock anymore. It wasn't hurt. It was the quiet, precise anger of someone who'd finally run out of grace. And I had no idea yet just how far I was willing to go to get my house back. By sunset, I was already on the highway to Lake Arrowhead. The traffic thinned as the city lights faded behind me, replaced by long stretches of pine trees and the hum of the tires against the asphalt. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, every word from my mother's voice, like a match striking the same wound. "Families help each other, Hillary. Don't be so dramatic." The farther I drove, the more that phrase began to rot in my chest. When I finally turned onto the familiar narrow road that curved around the lake, the air smelled like pine and cold water. I'd always loved this drive. It used to mean peace, quiet, my own space to breathe. But when I pulled up to the gate and saw the porch light glowing, my stomach dropped. I never left the light on. The curtains were different too, checkered, not white. Someone else's taste. I parked and sat there for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel, trying to believe it wasn't real. Then I unlocked the door with my own key. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Paint and glue, fresh, sharp, invasive. The living room, that once had soft beige walls, now screamed with gold patterns that shimmered under the light like bad hotel decor. My furniture was pushed aside. My favorite reading chair, the one I'd carried up those stairs myself, was covered with a floral blanket that wasn't mine. I moved through the house slowly, every step heavier than the last. In the kitchen, a spice rack had been screwed directly into the wall. crooked. I ran my fingers along the drill holes. My hand came away dusty with white plaster. Then I went upstairs. My study door was half open. I hesitated before pushing it as if the air behind it could burn. And when I saw it, I forgot to breathe. The walls were pink, not soft or pastel, neon bright enough to sting my eyes. My desk was shoved to the corner, books thrown in boxes, my framed photos stacked face down. It felt like walking into a stranger's house wearing my skin. I pressed my hand against the door frame, my pulse hammering in my throat. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. That's when I saw it, a small white dome in the corner of the ceiling. The security camera. 3 months ago, before leaving for a long project, I'd installed cameras inside the house, just in case. Back then, it felt unnecessary, maybe paranoid. But now that tiny lens was the only thing that made my knees stop shaking. I pulled out my phone, logged into the system, and scrolled through the saved footage. It loaded slowly, frame by frame, until finally there she was. Abigail, walking through the front door with the spare key, laughing on the phone with someone mom. She waved in a few contractors pointing at the walls. Tear this down, paint that pink. It's going to be perfect for us. Her voice filled the quiet room through my phone speaker. Sophie will freak out, but once we move in, it's ours. I stood frozen, watching her smile on the screen like it was a home renovation show, except the house was mine. And as I stared, the anger inside me finally went cold. Not the kind that burns, the kind that focuses. I backed up every file, labeled each folder carefully: living room footage, kitchen, upstairs hallway. Then I sat on the edge of the desk, the pink wall glaring behind me, and whispered to the empty room, "You made the wrong move this time." By the time the first light crept through the window, I hadn't slept a second. The house was silent, the kind of silence that hums in your bones. I sat at the kitchen counter laptop, opened every camera file downloaded, and backed up twice, one in cloud storage, one on an external drive. Beside it lay a neat stack of photos I'd taken: the gold wallpaper, the drill holes, the pink walls. Each one labeled, each one evidence. At 8:15 a.m., I drove straight to downtown Los Angeles to the office of Mr. Walker, a real estate attorney I'd worked with before. He was known for being calm, almost too calm, the kind of man who never raised his voice but always won. When I walked in, he looked up from his desk, eyes narrowing at my expression. "Hillary," he said, "you look like someone who's about to burn down a building." "Not burn," I said quietly, setting the laptop on his desk. "Rebuild." He motioned for me to sit. "Tell me everything." I did. From the phone call to the wallpaper to my mother's words, families help each other. He didn't interrupt. Just listened, pen tapping lightly against a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Do you have proof they entered without permission?" I turned the laptop toward him and pressed play. The video filled the screen: Abigail opening my front door with the spare key, smiling for the contractors, giving orders like she owned the place. The sound was crisp. He watched for nearly a minute, then stopped the video and exhaled slowly. "This," he said, "isn't a family dispute. It's unlawful entry, property damage, and extortion." "She demanded payment for the renovation, correct?" $3,000, I replied, my voice steady. "She said I owed her." He scribbled something down. "Good. We'll file both a civil and a criminal complaint. Civil for damages, criminal for trespass and coercion." For a moment I just sat there, watching him write. The weight of the last 24 hours pressed against my ribs, but under it something else had begun to grow: a sense of control, of clarity. Mr. Walker looked up. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we file, there's no taking it back. It'll destroy the family dynamic." I met his eyes. "There's nothing left to destroy." He nodded, once pulled a blank legal form from his drawer and began typing. The rhythmic click of the keys sounded almost musical, like punctuation to every boundary they'd crossed. As he typed, I glanced out the window. Down on the street, people were moving through their lives, coffee cups in hand, unaware that mine had just shattered the day before. When he was done, he printed the papers, the machine humming steadily between us. He slid the first document toward me and said, "Sign here." I signed without hesitation. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the quiet sister who kept the peace. I felt like someone who'd finally drawn the line and dared them to cross it again. 3 days later, I drove back to Lake Arrowhead. The morning air was cold enough to sting my lungs, and the lake shimmered under a thin layer of fog. In front of the house sat an unfamiliar minivan stuffed with boxes and children's toys. My stomach tightened. They'd moved in. I parked behind them, stepped out, and stood for a second with my hands in my coat pockets, watching the smoke curl from the chimney of my own home. The key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the front door. They were all there. My parents on the sofa, Abigail at the counter, Ethan on his phone pretending not to see me. 4 sets of eyes turned toward me. Abigail was the first to speak. "Hillary, you're finally here. We were just talking about you." Her tone was light mocking. "You got the letter from your lawyer, right? What the hell is that about?" I closed the door behind me, calm. "It's about you breaking into my house." "Oh my God, are we really doing this?" she scoffed. "Mom and Dad said it was fine. You barely even use this place." Mom leaned forward. "Hillary, be reasonable. She needed help. You have so much. Why can't you just share?" I looked at her, at the woman who'd raised me to believe keeping peace mattered more than being respected. "Because it's mine." Dad's voice rumbled. "We're family. You're taking this too far. Withdraw that lawsuit right now." "No." Abigail crossed her arms. "We already moved in. It's done. We spent money fixing it up, made it better. You should be thanking us." That made me laugh. I took the folder from my bag and placed it on the coffee table. "You want to talk about money? Here's something you should see." She frowned, flipping through the first few pages, copies of the property deed title certificate and a contract signed 3 months ago. "What is this? A full renovation project I approved and permitted with the city," I said evenly. "Demolition starts tomorrow morning at 9. The room froze. Abigail blinked, her voice cracking. "Demolition? You're kidding." "Do I look like I'm kidding?" I stepped closer. "Everything you see here, the wallpaper, the paint, the furniture you brought, it'll be gone by tomorrow. Rubble." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Hillary, this is insane," Dad muttered. "You wouldn't dare. Watch me." Abigail's face turned red. "You can't just tear it down. I spent money on this place." "And that," I said softly, "is called a confession." Her jaw dropped. "You just admitted to altering and occupying private property without consent." I continued, each word slow and deliberate. "Every word is being recorded on my phone right now, and the police already have copies of the footage showing you walking in with the spare key giving orders to the contractors." Abigail's mouth opened, but no sound came out. That was when the knock came at the door. 2 uniformed officers stood outside their badges, catching the light. "Good morning. Is this the residence of Ms. Hillary Carter?" "Yes." I stepped aside. "We're here regarding a criminal complaint, unlawful entry, and property damage. We need to speak with Ms. Abigail Collins." My mother shot up from the sofa. "This is outrageous. You can't just barge in here." The officer's tone remained calm. "Ma'am, please step aside. The house belongs to Ms. Carter. Everyone else is required to vacate immediately until the investigation concludes." The color drained from Abigail's face. No, please, this can't be happening." She turned to me, voice trembling. "Hillary, we're sisters." I looked at her, the same woman who'd laughed on the phone while tearing down my walls. "You should have remembered that before you stole from me." As the officers escorted her toward the door, Ethan stood frozen, pale, and silent. When she passed him, she snapped, "Say something." He didn't. He just whispered, "You lied to all of us." Outside, I heard her voice rising, begging, then fading into the distance as the police car pulled away. Inside, the silence was heavier than before. My parents stared at me, disbelief written all over their faces. Mom finally spoke, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You've destroyed your own sister's life." I met her eyes. "No, Mom, she destroyed it herself." Dad took a step forward, voice shaking with rage. "We raised you better than this. Then you should have taught me boundaries, not obedience." I turned away, picked up my folder, and walked to the front door. Before stepping out, I said quietly, "Construction starts at 9. You might want to remove anything sentimental before then." I left them standing there in the wreck of what they'd built, a family that called theft, love, and control care. When I reached my car, the first demolition truck was already coming up the hill, its yellow lights flashing in the fog. I rolled down the window, watched it stop at the gate, and told the driver, "Tomorrow, 9 sharp. No delays." He nodded. As the engine growled to life, I felt something loosen in my chest. For the first time, the word family didn't make me flinch. It made me stronger. And when the truck disappeared around the bend, I smiled to myself because the house wasn't the only thing being rebuilt. The next few months passed like quiet thunder. Abigail's case moved faster than anyone expected. The footage spoke louder than tears, and the law didn't care about family drama, it cared about proof. When the verdict came, the courtroom felt colder than any mountain air I'd ever breathed. "Guilty," the judge said simply. Abigail got 3 years of probation plus $85,000 in damages. Ethan filed for divorce a week later, taking full custody of their kids. My parents sat in the gallery, faces blank, as if the world had shifted under their feet. News spread through our small circle like wildfire. People whispered about the sister who pressed charges, about the golden child who fell. My mother stopped returning calls. My father refused to look me in the eye. I didn't care. I'd spent too long shrinking myself to make them comfortable. 9 months later, the house stood again. New frame, new walls, all traces of their intrusion erased. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the lake open and clean. No gold wallpaper, no pink paint, just light and air. One evening, as the sun bled into the water, I received a message from a cousin Abigail's working nights at a fast food place. "Living in your parents' basement." I read it once, then deleted it. Justice doesn't roar. It hums quietly, steady and certain, like the sound of the lake outside my window. And in that calm, I finally understood revenge isn't fury. It's peace. Sometimes I still drive up to the lake before sunrise, just to watch the light crawl across the water. That house isn't just walls, it's proof that silence can be louder than rage, and that boundaries can be rebuilt stronger than before. People say revenge changes you. Maybe it does, but for me it simply returned what they took peace. If this story hit home, share it. Someone out there needs to hear that it's okay to fight back quietly and completely. They called me the charity case before I even sat down. I heard it from across the table, not whispered, but clear enough to sting. The chandelier light caught every smirk, every glass raised in pretend grace. Monica leaned back in her chair, voice sweet and sharp. "This table's for real family, not for foster beggars." Laughter rippled through the restaurant, polished and cruel. I felt my face heat, but my hands stayed still. Then the waiter came laying a $2,900 bill in front of me like a dare. I slid my card across the linen, one quiet motion that changed everything. People said I was lucky. After my parents died in a car crash, I wasn't sent to a foster home. I was taken in by family friends Linda and Charles Hale. They smiled through every interview, told neighbors they were doing the right thing. And for a while, I believed them. I was 5 too small to notice the difference between kindness and charity. They gave me a tiny room at the end of the hall, painted pale yellow, like it might make up for the size. I got Monica's old clothes, Ethan's cracked textbooks, and a reminder that I should be grateful. "You're part of this family now," Linda would say, her voice tight with virtue. "Remember we saved you." Even then, I understood it wasn't love, it was a favor they never let me forget. The Hale house always looked perfect from the outside. White shutters rose, bushes trimmed to military precision, a driveway where Charles's luxury cars gleamed under morning light. Inside, though, the air was stiff. Every compliment had a price. Every family dinner felt like a performance. They prayed before meals, thanked God for blessings, then spent the rest of the evening measuring who deserved them more. Monica, 5 years older, was the star they built their world around. She had straight-A grades designer shoes and a laugh that could flip from charming to cruel in a heartbeat. Ethan, the middle child, followed her like a shadow. And me, I was the quiet one at the far end of the table, careful not to scrape my fork too loud. The only person who treated me like I belonged was Margaret Hale, Charles's mother. She was in her 70s when I met her, sharp as glass and twice as clear. She built Hale and Cumbie Pharmaceuticals from nothing, made her first million before Linda finished college. But she never acted like money made her better. She'd show up on Sundays with a box of pastries and that piercing, assessing look. "You read much, Violet?" she asked me once. I nodded. "Good. People who read learn how to survive quiet rooms. She was the only one who noticed the quiet. By the time I turned 28, I'd moved into a small apartment downtown and started my own design studio. It wasn't much, one desk, one computer, a view of a brick wall, but it was mine. I'd stopped waiting for the Hale family to see me. Still, I kept visiting Margaret. She'd call me her sensible granddaughter, and for a few hours, her living room felt like safety. Then Monica announced her celebration dinner, a victory party for a business deal. She posted the invite in the family group chat, the one I was still somehow in. "Everyone's coming," she wrote. The photo attached showed a glittering restaurant and a caption, "Family only." I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over my phone. Then I typed, "Should I still come?" and hit send. No one replied. The silence in that group chat stretched for days. No response, not even a polite emoji. Just seen. I told myself it didn't matter that I'd gotten used to being invisible. But every time my phone buzzed, a small part of me hoped it would be them, saying something kind, something normal. It never was. 3 nights before the dinner, Linda called not to invite me, but to remind me about the dress code. "Monica's booked a private dining hall," she said, cheerful in that rehearsed way of hers. "Everyone's wearing black and gold. You'll want to look presentable." Presentable. The same word she used when she made me redo my hair for church as a child. I said I'd be there. Her relief was audible, as if avoiding embarrassment was all that mattered. When I hung up, I stood by the window watching snow collect on the streetlights. Margaret had told me once that snow has 2 faces, soft when it falls, deadly when it piles. I understood that better now. The next day, I stopped by Margaret's home. She was sitting by the fireplace, a thick shawl around her shoulders, a mug of tea in hand. "You're quiet," she said without looking up. I told her about the dinner. She didn't ask if I wanted to go. She just nodded slowly. "Let them show you who they are," she murmured. "Sometimes that's the only gift they can give." Her words stayed with me. The night before the dinner, Monica's posts started flooding my feed, photos of gift bags, champagne bottles, designer heels lined in rows. Her caption read, "Hard work pays off. Blessed to celebrate with the best family ever." My stomach tightened. The best family ever. I almost texted her to cancel, to say I was busy, but I didn't. Instead, I took out the black dress I'd bought on clearance last year. I ironed it, repaired a loose hem, and laid it across my bed. Then I took my old leather bag, the same one I'd carried since college, and slipped in a simple silver bracelet Margaret had given me years ago. "For luck," she'd said. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory came back: birthday candles I wasn't allowed to blow out, holidays where my name was forgotten on gift tags. By morning, the decision felt final. "I'm going," I whispered to my reflection. Not for them, for me. The restaurant glowed like it was built to impress. Warm, light white linen, the faint scent of truffle oil in the air. I arrived a few minutes early, clutching my small purse tighter than I meant to. A hostess smiled politely. "Party for Hale?" she asked. I nodded. When I reached the table, they were already there. Monica in gold silk, Ethan scrolling his phone, Linda and Charles laughing too loud. For a second, no one looked up. Then Monica turned, her lips curving just enough to sting. "Oh, Violet, you made it," she said, as if surprised I'd found the courage. "Of course," I answered, keeping my voice calm. "Wouldn't miss it." The hostess tried to add a chair, but Monica stopped her. "It's okay. She can sit at the end." I felt the heat rise up my neck. Margaret was the only one who objected. "No," she said firmly. "She'll sit next to me." Her tone silenced everyone. I smiled at her, grateful, and took my seat. Dinner began. Dishes arrived like choreography: lobster tails, filet mignon, glasses of wine I didn't order. I kept quiet, cutting my food into small, forgettable pieces. Across the table, Monica launched into a speech about her big deal, how she'd closed a partnership worth millions. Charles beamed proud. Linda dabbed her lips, saying, "That's our girl." When there was a pause, I spoke. Actually, I began softly. I just signed my biggest client yet, a national campaign. The words hung in the air, fragile but real. I waited for a simple, "That's great." Instead, Linda smiled without looking at me. "That's nice, dear," she said, turning to Monica again. "Now tell us more about your deal." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was enough. The same tone, the same dismissal I'd grown up with. I focused on Margaret. She was quiet, her fork, untouched eyes moving from face to face. Her jaw tightened, though she said nothing. When dessert arrived, Monica raised her glass. To family, real family, she said, staring directly at me. The others echoed, to family. My throat burned. I took a sip of water, hands steady, even as my heart hammered. Somewhere inside, something finally shifted. Not a snap, but a slow, certain break. I'm fine, I whispered to myself. Just fine. The laughter around the table didn't sound human anymore. It was the sharp, empty kind people use to prove they belong. I stared at my glass, watching the reflection of the chandelier ripple across the water. Then Monica's voice cut through it again, sweet and venomous. This table's for real family, not for foster beggars. The room went quiet for half a breath, then exploded with chuckles and smirks. Even Linda laughed the same high, nervous sound she used when pretending everything was fine. Charles didn't look at me. Ethan mumbled something under his breath, but I couldn't make it out. My cheeks burned, but I kept my head high. My voice didn't work, and maybe that was for the best. I pressed my napkin into my lap, careful, deliberate. Every muscle in my body screamed to leave, but leaving would mean they'd won. The waiter came by with a tight smile. "Will there be anything else?" Monica waved her hand. "Just the check, please." He returned a moment later and placed the leather folder in front of me. I blinked, thinking it was a mistake. Then Monica leaned forward, smiling wide enough for the whole restaurant to see. "You don't mind, right? Think of it as a thank you for everything we've done for you." The words hit like a slap. I looked down. The total, $2,900, nearly a month of my rent. My fingers trembled as I traced the number. No one spoke. No one stopped her. I could have said no. I could have walked out. But instead, I pulled out my card. The plastic felt cold in my palm. The waiter hesitated, glancing between us, sensing something wrong. I nodded. When the machine beeped, it echoed in my chest. One sharp sound, one transaction for 2 decades of humiliation. I set the pen down, slid the folder back, and folded my napkin over my empty plate. "All done," I said quietly. For a few seconds, it was completely still, just forks clinking in the distance, soft jazz from the speakers. Then out of nowhere, Margaret pushed back her chair. The screech of wood against marble turned every head. "I'm done?" she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Linda laughed uneasily. "Mother, don't be dramatic." Margaret raised a hand. "No, I've watched this circus long enough." Her eyes went straight to Monica. "You, your father, your mother, you've all forgotten what decency looks like." Monica blinked, thrown off. "What are you talking about? We were just joking." "Joking?" Margaret's voice hardened. "You humiliate this girl, my granddaughter, in public, and for what?" To feel powerful for one more dinner, the color drained from Monica's face. "She's not your granddaughter." Margaret straightened her shoulders. "You're wrong. She's the only one who's ever acted like family." The table froze. Charles reached for his glass, missed it, and set his hand flat against the table instead. Linda tried to laugh again, but it broke halfway out. "I have cancer," Margaret said simply. "Stage 4. I have 6 months." The silence hit like thunder. Monica's mouth fell open. "Mom, no, save it." Margaret interrupted. "I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here for truth. I changed my will last week." She turned to me. "Violet inherits everything." The words didn't sink in at first. I thought I'd misheard. But when I looked at her, she was steady, certain. Monica shot to her feet. "You can't do that. That money belongs to this family." "Family." Margaret's eyes burned. "You mean the same people who stole $700,000 from a child's trust fund?" Linda's fork clattered to the table. "Mother, please, I found the records," Margaret continued. "Every cent Violet's parents left for her, gone. Spent on vacations, private school, new cars. You used her pain as your down payment." Charles slammed his palm down. "You don't understand how expensive. I understand perfectly," she cut in. "You took what wasn't yours." I sat frozen, heart racing. I hadn't known about the trust fund, hadn't known about any of it. The air thickened. Monica's lipstick trembled at the corners. Ethan stared down at his plate, silent for once. Margaret looked at me again. "Take me home, Violet." That broke the spell. Monica grabbed my arm. "You did this," she hissed. "You turned her against us." I pulled away, my voice low but clear. I didn't have to. You did that yourself, she glared, shaking. We'll challenge it. We'll go to court. You'll get nothing. Then I'll see you there, I said. I helped Margaret to her feet. Her hand felt fragile but steady in mine. We walked past the stunned table, past the staring faces of strangers. The music seemed to fade. Outside, the night air was cold, sharp, honest. Margaret squeezed my hand. I should have done this years ago, she said softly. Inside, through the window, I could still see them. Monica red-faced and shouting, Linda holding her head, Charles waving for the waiter as if money could glue their dignity back together. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet, just clean, empty in a way that finally made room for peace. Later that week, the news broke. Headlines screamed, heiress cuts off, family leaves fortune to foster daughter. Reporters swarmed. Talk shows debated whether I'd manipulated her. I stayed silent. Margaret didn't. She held a press conference sitting tall beside her lawyer. I am of sound mind, she declared, and I'm tired of watching good hearts punished for existing. The cameras flashed. She handed out folders, bank statements, trust fund records, proof of every stolen cent. And then she played the video from the restaurant. Monica's voice echoed across the speakers. This table's for real family, not for foster beggars. The room went dead silent. Margaret looked into the cameras. This is what cruelty sounds like when it thinks no one is listening. As if on cue, the doors burst open. Monica stormed in, mascara-streaked voice shaking. She's lying. Violet used her. We raised that girl out of pity. She owes us. Reporters gasped. Cameras turned. Margaret tilted her head. Did you just say she owes you? I mean, she... Monica stammered, realizing too late. The lawyer leaned forward. You just admitted it. On record. The clip hit the internet before nightfall. 20 million views by morning. The comments weren't kind. Imagine saying that on camera. Justice served in real time. By the time the trial came, public opinion had already chosen sides. The judge ruled the will valid, the trust fund stolen, the restitution owed. Margaret's decision stood. I didn't celebrate. I just sat beside her in the courtroom as she squeezed my hand again, whispering, You see, silence works when truth is loud enough. A month later, she was gone. At her funeral, I placed a single white rose on her casket, the same color as the tablecloth from that night. For a moment, I closed my eyes and heard that same sharp beep from the credit card machine, but this time it didn't sting. It sounded like a door closing and another one opening. The world moved fast after the verdict, but I didn't. I stayed in Margaret's house, the one with the wide porch and the lemon trees she loved. It felt strange at first, living in silence that didn't hurt. The air smelled like her perfume and old books. Every morning I made tea the way she did, 2 sugars, no milk. Charles was sentenced to 3 years for financial fraud. Linda sold their house to cover legal fees, then vanished from the city pages. Ethan's loan surfaced. His fiancée left. Monica lost her business after that viral clip became an internet cautionary tale. Every brand cut ties overnight. Reporters tried to get a statement from me. I never gave one. There was nothing left to say. Justice, once it arrives, doesn't need an encore. I focused on work, then on something bigger. Using part of the inheritance, I started the Margaret Foundation, a program for foster and adopted kids who'd been cheated or silenced. We funded lawyers, therapy, tuition, everything I once needed, but never had. The first check I signed felt heavier than money. It felt like redemption. A year later, an application came across my desk, Monica Hale requesting assistance for financial hardship and mental health support. I read every word. She wrote that she'd lost everything, that she was sorry, that she wanted a second chance. For a moment, I thought about approving it. Then I remembered her voice at that table, how the laughter felt slicing through me like glass. I stamped the file, denied, and slid it aside. Some victories are quiet. Mine was. That night, I lit a candle for Margaret and whispered, "We did it." The flame flickered, once steady and bright, like she'd heard me. I visit her grave every Sunday. The grass grows fast there, soft against the marble, and the city noise fades just enough to think. I tell her about the foundation, about the kids we've helped, 200 and counting. Sometimes I imagine her smiling, that small knowing smile, the one that meant she'd already seen the ending before I lived it. People still ask if I forgave them. I tell them forgiveness isn't freedom, boundaries are. Family isn't who raised you. It's who never made you pay for a seat at the table. If you've ever had to fight to be seen, share your story in the comments. And hit subscribe, someone out there might need to hear yours next. I never imagined my own parents would be the ones to risk my child's life. They drained the $150,000 I'd spent years saving for my daughter's heart surgery and called it family help. My mother laughed and thanked me for funding my sister's wedding. I wasn't even invited. I smiled, nodded, and walked away without a word. That same afternoon, while a bride walked down the aisle, authorities stormed the ballroom and arrested her groom. Minutes later, my phone lit up. It was my father, sobbing uncontrollably. What he didn't know was that I'd planned this long before anyone said I do that day alone. My name is Olivia. I work in healthcare, long shifts, early mornings, the kind of job where you learn to stay calm while everything around you is loud and urgent. At home, it's just me and my daughter Emma. She's 7, small for her age, bright eyes, a laugh that turns into heavy breathing if she runs too fast. She was born with a heart condition, something doctors explained to me in careful voices like words might shatter if spoken too loudly. Our mornings were quiet, cereal bowls clinking, the hum of the refrigerator, Emma sitting at the table swinging her legs asking if today was a good heart day. Some days were, some weren't. I learned to measure time differently, not in years but in appointments, checkups, and the dates circled on the calendar for her surgery. I started saving when she was 2, a separate account, every extra shift, every bonus. Birthday money from relatives went straight in. I skipped vacations, bought used furniture, said no when people asked why I never treated myself. I told them the truth. I'm saving my daughter's life. Most people understood. Some looked uncomfortable and changed the subject. My parents lived across town. On the surface, we were a normal family. Holiday dinners, group photos. My mother, Margaret, liked control disguised as concern. My father stayed quiet, always smoothing things over. And my younger sister, Melissa, had a way of floating through life with a soft landing every time. New car, big engagement ring, a wedding everyone was already calling the event of the year. When the surgery date was finally confirmed 6 weeks out, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Fear, too. But mostly, hope. That's when my mother suggested putting her name on the account. In case of emergencies, she said. What if something happens to you? It sounded reasonable. She was Emma's grandmother. Family. I remember hesitating, my finger hovering over the screen. Emma was coloring beside me, tongue between her teeth, completely trusting the world around her. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself blood meant safety. I added my mother to the account. 2 days later, Melissa sent a picture of her wedding venue. Crystal lights, white roses, a price tag I didn't ask about. I stared at the photo longer than I should have, a strange tightness in my chest, like my instincts were trying to say something my heart wasn't ready to hear yet. I noticed the money was gone on a Tuesday morning. Nothing dramatic, no alarms, no alerts, just a number that didn't make sense. 0. I refreshed the app, closed it, opened it again, still 0. The account that had taken me 5 years to build. The account I checked every week like a ritual. Gone. My hands started to shake. I told myself there had to be a mistake, a glitch, a temporary hold. I called the bank from my car before work, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. After a few minutes on hold, a calm voice confirmed it. The withdrawal was authorized by the joint account holder, my mother. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I drove straight to my parents' house, the same house I'd grown up in, same porch, same doorbell. My mother opened the door with a smile like this was a social visit. What happened to my money, I asked. She blinked once, then waved her hand like I'd asked about the weather. Oh, we needed it. I said. Your sister, she replied. The wedding. Prices are outrageous these days. You understand. I reminded her about Emma, about the surgery, about the date circled on the calendar. My mother leaned against the doorway and sighed. She'll be fine, she said. Kids bounce back. This wedding only happens once. I felt something crack inside me, slow and quiet. Then she smiled. Anyway, thank you. You really helped your sister out. That was when I asked about the invitation. I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear it. She didn't even look apologetic. It's a big day, limited space. And honestly, Olivia, you always bring things down with medical talk. Medical talk. That's what she called my daughter's heart condition. I left without another word. Sat in my car for almost half an hour staring at the steering wheel. I didn't go inside to cry. I didn't call anyone to vent. I went home and made Emma lunch like it was any other day. That night, I noticed something else. Melissa had blocked me on social media. No messages, no explanation, just silence, like I'd already been written out of the story. 2 days later, Emma struggled to catch her breath walking up the stairs. I carried her the rest of the way, held her while she slept, listened to the uneven rhythm of her breathing in the dark. That was the moment it became clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't carelessness. This was a choice. My parents had chosen a wedding over a child. My sister had accepted it without question. And I finally understood something I'd avoided my entire life. If I wanted to protect my daughter, I couldn't rely on family anymore. I needed to rely on the truth. That night, after Emma fell asleep, the house felt louder than usual. The heater clicked on and off. A car passed outside. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the calendar on the wall. The surgery date was circled in red. 6 weeks had become 4. Her doctor had moved it up after the last visit. We shouldn't wait, he'd said, careful professional. I nodded like I always did. Inside, I was counting hours. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text my sister. I washed dishes, packed Emma's lunch, folded laundry, normal things, survival things. But my mind kept replaying my mother's smile. The way she'd said, kids bounce back, like it was a slogan she'd heard somewhere, not a life on the line. The next morning, I sat in my car outside work and finally let myself think clearly. Not emotionally, logically. The account had been drained legally. That meant yelling wouldn't fix it. Begging wouldn't either. I needed options that didn't rely on their conscience. That's when I thought of Derek. My sister's fiancé always made me uneasy, too polished, too eager to talk numbers. I remembered a Thanksgiving dinner years ago when he'd mentioned shipments, delays money tied up overseas. I'd brushed it off then. Now it stuck. I reached out to someone I barely knew. Tom, a business partner of Derek's I'd met once. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop in the city. Nothing dramatic, just 2 people sitting across from each other, hands wrapped around paper cups. He looked tired, nervous. He didn't smile. I can't keep pretending anymore, he said quietly, especially after what they did to your kid. He didn't give me details all at once, just enough to understand the shape of it, questionable payments, bills that didn't line up, money moving in circles that made no sense. He slid a folder across the table. No labels, just paper, numbers, patterns. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal, he said. I just don't want to be part of this anymore. I took the folder home and waited until Emma was asleep again. I spread everything out on the table. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I read, cross-checked, highlighted. What I didn't understand, I researched. What looked wrong, I flagged. By the time the sun came up, I knew 2 things. First, my sister's wedding wasn't being paid for with love or generosity. Second, the truth didn't belong to me alone anymore. I contacted the appropriate authorities and told them exactly what I had. No accusations, no emotions, just facts. They listened. They asked careful questions. They took copies. When they left my house, was quiet again. Emma stirred upstairs, calling my name. I went to her, lifted her into my arms, and felt how light she was. I pressed my cheek to her hair and made myself a promise. Whatever happened next, I would not look away. The morning of the wedding arrived quietly. No alarms, no sirens. Just sunlight slipping through the blinds and the soft sound of Emma breathing in the next room. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house wake up around us. Today was supposed to be a celebration. White dresses, champagne flutes, smiles stretched too wide for photographs. I stayed home. Emma padded into the kitchen in her socks, dragging her blanket behind her. I made pancakes the way she liked them, slightly uneven, with chocolate chips pressed into the batter. She sat at the table, swinging her legs, telling me about a dream where her heart was a clock that finally learned how to tick properly. I smiled and listened even though my phone sat face down on the counter, buzzing every few minutes. By noon, the messages stopped. That's when I knew the ceremony had started. Across the city, guests were taking their seats. Programs were being passed out. Music was swelling. My mother was probably fussing over details, making sure everything looked perfect. Melissa would be somewhere nearby, nervous and glowing, convinced this was the happiest day of her life. I folded laundry, helped Emma with a puzzle. We watched a cartoon neither of us really paid attention to. I kept glancing at the clock, not with anxiety, but with a strange sense of calm. Everything that could be done had already been done. At 4:27, my phone rang. I didn't answer. It rang again and again. I let it go to voicemail. Emma looked up at me, crayons in her hand. "Aren't you going to pick up?" she asked. In a minute, I said, "Finish coloring." At 4:35, the house phone rang. That one I answered. "What did you do?" My mother screamed before I could say a word. Her voice was unrecognizable, sharp, broken, panicked. "What did you do?" In the background, I heard shouting, chairs scraping, someone crying loudly enough that it cut through the noise. "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I stayed home. They stopped everything," she sobbed. "They walked in right in the middle. People were watching. Cameras. Melissa was at the altar. Derek," she choked on his name. "They put him in handcuffs," she whispered, like saying it quietly might undo it. I leaned against the counter, steadying myself. My heart wasn't racing. It felt slow, focused. "Who stopped it?" I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. A moment later, another call came through. My sister. I declined it. Then my father. I answered that one. "Olivia," he said, his voice shaking. "Please tell me this isn't happening. Tell me you didn't have anything to do with this. I told the truth," I said. "That's all." There was silence on the line. Then a long, broken exhale. "They're saying his accounts are frozen," my father said. "The wedding planner just left. The guests are confused. Your mother is inconsolable. This is a nightmare." I pictured the ballroom, the flowers, the untouched cake, the way conversations would turn into whispers, then speculation. I imagined my mother's face, the control finally slipping. "You ruined your sister's wedding," he said quietly. I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "Your choices did that. Mine just made them visible." He started to argue, but my mother grabbed the phone back. "After everything we've done for you," she cried. "After we raised you, you do this to us. To your own family." I thought about Emma's breathing on the stairs, the calendar on my wall, the zero in my bank account. "You took money meant to keep your granddaughter alive," I said. "You laughed about it. You told me I was ruining the mood. This is the mood you chose." She sobbed harder. "We were going to pay you back with what I asked. They're seizing everything." That's when her voice broke completely. "They said it's serious," she whispered. "They said this has been going on for years." "Yes," I said. "That's what happens when the truth catches up." Melissa's voice suddenly cut in, distant but furious. "Give me the phone." There was shuffling. Then her breathing, sharp and fast. "I hope you're happy," she said. "You humiliated me. In front of everyone. You destroyed my life." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You accepted money you knew wasn't yours," I said. "Money meant for your niece's surgery. You blocked me. You didn't invite us. This didn't start today." She laughed a hollow sound. "You're always so dramatic. It was just money." Something cold settled in my chest. "It was my daughter's heart," I said. "And you spent it on flowers." She didn't answer. In the background, someone announced that everyone needed to leave the venue. I heard heels clicking fast, someone yelling at security, a door slamming. "I can't believe you'd go this far," my mother cried. "How could you be so cruel?" I looked over at Emma, still coloring, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Cruel," I repeated softly. "Cruel is stealing from a sick child and calling it help." I ended the call. The house went quiet again. Too quiet. I stood there for a moment, letting it wash over me. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty. I felt finished. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "It's done," it read. "They have enough." I deleted it without replying. That evening, my father called again. This time he didn't yell. They're saying he could be charged with multiple counts, he said. It could mean years. I know, I said. And your mother... He trailed off. She keeps saying she never thought it would go this far. I stared out the window as the sun dipped behind the houses. It already had, I said. You just weren't looking. He was quiet for a long time. What happens now? He finally asked. For you, I said. Or for me. For all of us. I thought about that, about family dinners that would never happen again, about the photos on my parents' walls that would slowly be taken down, about how blood ties stretch until they snap. For me, I said, I take care of my daughter. I hung up before he could respond. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat alone on the couch. The same couch where I'd once cried quietly, afraid of what would happen if I spoke up. My phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail from my mother. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. The confrontation wasn't in the ballroom. It wasn't in the shouting or the accusations. It had happened long before the moment I chose not to look away, and there was no going back. The days after the wedding felt strangely quiet, like the air after a storm finally moves again. There were no more screaming calls, no more accusations, just updates that came through other people, softened, filtered. Derek's accounts were frozen. Everything tied to his business was under review. The venue wanted answers. Vendors wanted payment. The wedding photos were never sent out. The story everyone whispered about wasn't romance anymore. It was consequences. My father called once, voice low and tired. He apologized without really saying the words. My mother didn't call again. I heard she stayed in bed for days telling anyone who would listen that she'd only been trying to help her family. I didn't correct her. I didn't need to. What mattered was Emma. A nurse from the hospital called to move her surgery up again. Sooner, but necessary. The number scared me at first. Then something unexpected happened. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. Coworkers shared a fundraiser. Strangers donated small amounts with notes that said things like, "For Emma, and you're doing the right thing." Within a week, we were close. Close enough that I could finally breathe. The night before her surgery, Emma asked me if everything was going to be okay. I told her the truth. Yes, I said, it is. And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. I didn't win anything that day. I lost the illusion that blood automatically means love. But I kept what mattered, my daughter, her future, my peace. I learned that protecting your child isn't betrayal, it's courage. And sometimes the hardest boundaries are the ones that save lives. If this story hit close to home, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real stories about family betrayal and quiet justice, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.